Hello, YouTube. Among Russian folklore and Russian mythology, one of the most interesting and mysterious characters is the Indrik beast named Indrik. The most complete information about him is contained in the so-called dove, like pigeon, book, a spiritual verse with a fundamental cosmological and cosmogonic meaning, whose roots go back to pagan antiquity, and which is obviously a fragment of some monument of Slavic mythology. Let me tell you a little bit about this book. Golubinaya Kniga in Russian is a medieval Russian spiritual verse. At least 20 versions are known. They vary in length from 30 to over 900 lines. The earliest extant manuscript is dated to the 17th century. The main part of the Dove book is a long sequence of riddles. In a series of answers to those riddles, King David explains the origin of light, sun, moon, and social classes. He also mentions a mysterious stone, the alatir. The root golub, dove, in the title Golubinaya is not about birds. It is believed to be derived from the root glub in Russian, depth, deep, which refers to depth of concepts described in the book. In addition, the Indrik beast is mentioned in other sources, including, for example, sectarian verses. What are the characteristics of this mysterious creature, also called Indra, Vindrik, Indrok, Indirchik, Belayandrich, Jedinor, Inarog, I'll translate, other horn, Jedinarog, meaning unicorn, in different versions of the Dove book, despite the fact that the beast, according to some images, has 2 horns. In others, it has 1. In the Dove book, which tells what happens from what, and who is the greater father in his own way, and in such a way that all this is as closely linked as possible with Christian symbolism, the Indrik beast stands somewhat apart. He is the father of all animals, and this is due to his strength, since when it's over, if he turns, then Mother Earth will shake under him. Then all the animals will bow to him. I'm reading excerpts from the verses. They don't keep him. The mountains are made of stone, and his rivers are fast. Therefore, he walks to the dungeon, meaning using his horn, like the sun in the sky, while clearing streams and crevices. Wherever the beast passes, the spring boils. There is also an opportunity for him to come to the surface. Then he begins to fight with the lion for seniority. As we can see, there is nothing specifically Christian, except perhaps the mention that he lives in the Holy or Zion mountain, but that would be not specifically Christian. It seems that here we're talking about some kind of real animal. First, about the mystery. Even Indrik's appearance is a mystery. This creature is always indistinctly described, with a minimum of detail and a maximum of pathos, while only the Lubachnya images have been preserved, no older than the 18th century. Let me explain. The Lubachная literatura or literature is a cheap, mass-produced print media in Russia that appeared in the second half of the 18th century. Typical genre of popular literature were adaptations of fairy tales and epics, chivalrous novels, historical tales, adventurous stories, the lives of saints, songbooks, collections of jokes, oracles, dream books, or dream interpretation books. The works of fiction were usually anonymous. very interesting and should not be discounted because some interesting mythological tales were presented in the literature. Meanwhile, Indrik had already merged into the European unicorn in the mass consciousness. I am giving you opinions of different Russian researchers, and I will try to separate them, but there are different views, different interpretations of what the beast was. So please bear with me. And his originality thus was limited to the crooked-handedness of the draftsmen, as well as the fact that they did not imagine unicorns too well. In the Middle Ages, however, the now almost forgotten Indrik played an important role in the tales of the Eastern Slavs, important on the rights of a unique being. Indrik is a proper name and semi-divine. Indrik was able to communicate with people, instantly moved in space, ruled over animals, of which he was the father, was the supreme spirit of rivers, and arbitrarily changed reality. That is, like that famous goldfish, he fulfilled wishes, if he wanted to. According to the Golubinaya Kniga, or the Dove Book, the Indrik beast lived somewhere beyond the sea and in the subterranean world. Of the signs, only the horn is indicated, whatever signs that pertain to him. Indrik uses his horn to walk through the dungeon, like the sun moves in the sky. So there is certain easiness of how he walks through the subterranean world using his horn to make passage. Sometimes, however, there are two horns, and in the parallel, partly afterlife, in the world beyond, 30th kingdom beyond the forest, Indrik is also found, encountered on the surface of our planet. In various sources, Indrik turns out to be either vaguely gigantic or the size of a dog. However, his attributes are perplexing at first glance due to their lack of analogues both among animals inhabiting Russia and animals from all over the world. There are no subterranean inhabitants of such a gigantic size. The largest is the aardvark, 1.5 meters long. So, is it still a fantastic creature? Or maybe his image is inspired by earthquakes and volcanic eruptions. But then what do the horns have to do with it? And by the way, in that Dove book, the whale fish, ribakit, on which the earth stands, is responsible for earthquakes. So it wouldn't be Indrik. Consciously leaving aside the religious and mythological essence of Indrik, meaning what kind of deity does he represent, Russian researchers, some at least, try to express a few opinions about his real prototype. The fact is that similar legends about the mysterious mole animal of unprecedented size are common throughout the Russian north, Siberia, and even in China, Manchuria. The Chinese call him Tin Shu or Ni Shu, the mouse that hides. The Manchus call him Fan Shu. The Eskimos call him Kilu Knuk. The Hanti people call Wes. The Mansi would use the word Vitkas. Some Finnish, like Finland tribes, would say Mamut, earth mole. Among some ethnicities and tribes, he is the creator of the earth who brought it from the depth. He brought the earth from some depths. His inscriptions are of the same type. It's the size of an elephant. Descriptions. It's the size of an elephant or a bull, but it looks like a mouse. He always lives underground, and if he accidentally gets to the surface, he immediately dies. He can also die if he gets into sandy soil, then it crumbles and squeezes him. He feeds on dirt. moves underground using his horns, sometimes called teeth, which the animal digs with or excavates with, moving them in different directions or even crossing them. So he's able to use his horns to change place, to take different positions, whatever is needed in his labor to move about. The animal is very strong. It's a powerful beast. In the Eskimo legends, even the earth could not stand it. When it moves, the earth shakes, and when it moves, it pours into the dug-out tunnel and forms craters. As you can see, there are a lot of analogies of the animal I described from different ethnicities' mythology with Indrik. The most important thing is that the horns of these giant moles can be obtained. Their corpses with horns growing out of their mouths are almost always found in the spring after ice breaking and flooding, in river cliffs as well as along the slopes of gorges, where they accidentally pop out of the ground. By the way, there are finds along the banks and at the bottom of rivers. The researcher asks us to remember the stone mountains cannot hold him, and those are his fast rivers, from that verse from Golubina Kniga. It led to the fact that among the Hanti and Mansi, indigenous people of the Russian Arctic, they are mostly considered aquatic creatures, like old animals and fish, especially pikes, turn into. As is probably clear, the researchers are talking here about mammoths that became extinct at the end of the last glaciation, a little over 10,000 years ago, that ice age, whose corpses, however, were perfectly preserved in permafrost, and as the soil eroded and crumbled, they appeared in the light of day, which allowed, for example, Russia to become one of the world's exporters of this ivory, mammoth ivory. Mammoths live throughout Europe and in most of Asia and North America, so it's not surprising that their remains were probably repeatedly found by Slavs, ancient tribes. It is also possible that information about them came to Slavic settlers from Finnish neighbors and predecessors. It is not for nothing that the Russian word mammoth, is derived from the Finnish already mentioned mamut. There is also a similar Nenets, people of the north, ethnicity, word meaning devourer of the earth, and entered Russian folklore under the name Indrika. The finds of mammoths on cliffs where springs usually flow fit perfectly here, hence the connection with underground water sources and helplessness with all his strength on the surface of the earth. No wonder, in this case, he submitted to the lion. He did not have enough strength to fight him. And most importantly, the impression of the appearance of this truly largest of the creatures inhabiting Russian nature. Along with the mammoth, the rhinoceros, which lived with it at the same time and is found in the same strata, it also had two horns. And the big horned deer can also be included among the prototypes of the subterranean giant. The Hanti and Mansi, for example, sometimes represent the mammoth in the form of an elk or a pike with an elk head. The appendages and the horns of the mammoth are often mentioned. In conclusion, one Russian researcher noted, it should be noted that in all modern publications that he has come across where they try to define the Indrik prototype, it is interpreted extremely unconvincingly. He is associated with the otter, the mongoose, Indria, the hydra, but mostly with the unicorn. See, for example, although it is obvious that these are completely different characters related to each other by consonants, the closest the authors of the Dictionary of the Russian people of the 11th to 17th century came to resolving this issue was based on an analysis of the text from the 17th century, which mentioned completely real Indrik horns, which came to this definition of the meaning of the word Indrik, an animal with tusks, as well as fantastic animal from others. Indrik designations of the elephant, the sacred animal of the god Indra. However, even at the beginning of the 20th century, this meaning was clearly more understandable, since when in 1915 in the Turgai steppe of Kazakhstan, the famous Russian geologist and paleontologist Borisyak found the remains of a giant 5 meters at the withers, albeit a hornless rhinoceros that lived about 30 million years ago, and the new fossil was named Indrikotherium, which means Indrik beast in Russian. Due to the impossibility of its restoration, the only thing that can be said for sure about the origin of the image is that Indrik has nothing to do with the Indias, Indra, the patron saint of the Kshatriya caste. Due to the lack of a connection between Russian and Indian mythology, as well as any intersections in the description, and this is despite the fact that there is no specific mention of Indrik. There is no reason to believe that the legends of Indrik are connected with the finds of mammoth bones, according to these researchers. Mammoths were indeed considered underground animals in the northern Russian, Finnish, and Siberian lands, like moles, that died immediately if exposed to sunlight. But the underground lifestyle and horns, they're the only thing that bring Indrik closer to the mammoth. There's also this opinion. Interestingly, however, Indrik, who was carried away by the river of time, nevertheless has a familiar descendant in the modern legendarium. Apparently, it is the tales of Indrik that underlie the image of the hunchbacked horse, which was not mentioned in any form in Russian folktale before author named Yershov. The little hunchback horse, Russian конек горбунок, is a Russian literary fairy tale in verse by Pyotr Yershov, written in 1830s and first published in 1834. Its protagonist is Ivan the Fool with his magic helper, little humpback horse. It's become a Russian literary classic. It was reprinted many times in the Russian Empire and in the USSR. The tale is a version of golden maned steed fairy tale motif about a horse with wondrous abilities. The plot of this tale uses a combination of several motifs used in a number of folk tales in Russia, as Tsarevich Ivan, or Ivan the Prince, the Firebird, and the Grey Wolf. The Russian poet creatively reinterpreted the image, making it somewhat mundane and giving the pretentious magical beast caricatured features. That, however, does not negate the fact, despite being in the position of just the riding animal, the horse is in full control of the situation and is the main character of the fairy tale. He is almost omnipotent. The legend of Indrik is an echo to some of the finds of the remains of woolly rhinoceros, a contemporary of the mammoth. And who knows, maybe he still lived somewhere in the olden days, or maybe not because of the remains, but based on the legends passed down by the word of mouth from the time when the ancestors still encountered woolly rhinoceros alive in what is now Russia, Siberia, Eastern Europe, and so on. So echoes of the mammoth, or the woolly rhinoceros, or the giant mole, or maybe an ancient high-tech, a universal robotic creature able to dig for subterranean tunnels, move in space, communicate and control animals, radioactive, feeding on just the dirt or rocks. Somehow it reminds me of the capable robotic assistants of China's first emperor, Huan Di, or the Yellow Emperor, the one who gave humans knowledge and who later departed back to his home star on his powerful dragon spaceship. Please see my videos about China's past and the Yellow Emperor and much more, and read carefully the description of his very capable robotic mechanical assistants and the impression their presence and deeds left on the Chinese people. That's what I wanted to let you know today, and I'll bring you more interesting stories from Eurasia, particularly China, Russia, what is Ukraine, Belarus, and other post-Soviet countries today, of course the Arctic and beyond. So if you like my research, please support through links you find in the description to this channel. Expect more interesting videos on a number of paranormal and related subjects. And please subscribe to my channel. Please like my videos. Thank you for your attention to my work.